When your old career gives you lemons, throw in some ice, mix in some vodka, and call it a podcast. From the Mac of All Trades studio in Fairport, and driven by Victor Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, it's Billified, the Bill Moran Podcast.
Welcome. Thanks for getting your pod on. Thanks for telling a friend. That's how we spread the word about the pirate ship. I'm so excited today. I wasn't sure this was actually going to happen, but a guy who I have always... Here's the thing about this person I'm about to introduce. I knew about this person before I met this person.
Come on.
Yeah. I went to St. John Fisher. I had transferred in. I had come in the August... You had graduated the previous May, and I had heard the name Kevin LeGrett like several times. I had heard about Kevin LeGrett, and I think you were still going and using the gym.
Yeah.
And so people would see you and go, yeah, it's LeGrett, man. He was, and I heard all that, like so you were the guy. I knew who you were before I knew you. And then when I wound up needing a job, so I did 1 year. Then I took a year off and I did overnights on a rock station in Poughkeepsie because my father told me I needed to mature myself before I went back.
WPDH?
I did WPDH.
Look at that, I remember.
He did. So I did that midnight to 6. And then when I came back, he said to me, he used to send me money to party. And he goes, I'm not doing that now. You got to figure this out on your own. So I'm like, all right. I waited tables in the summer in Utah, in Park City. Do I do that or radio? So I sent a tape to the program director at CMF. And he hired me. And then I go in, and there's Kevin LeGrett. And I'm like, oh, my God, this is the guy that everybody talked about on Fisher. There was basketball. Like, you were the BMOC.
It was a long time ago.
Well, it's all right. Have you been over to see the campus?
I haven't been over there. I give money, but I haven't been over there in quite some time.
Oh, your money's doing well because the place looks – it's tight. You know, it's kind of nice the way Nazareth has – more space, but it's tight over there. It's a university now. Yeah. It's doing well. I'm friends with the guys who run the psychology, or more the I guess they're more of a counseling what they're doing over there, but they run that. And
is friends code word for that you use them?
No, I don't. Actually, when I decided that I needed to go back to therapy, I did call them, and they recommended to somebody.
You are great.
See, you're absolutely true.
So
I did. I had to do it. But one of the things that I always found very, very admirable about you was the ability to just, I don't want to say plow through, but achieve at a high level consistently. And when you even go back even to college, like there was a knee injury that I think would have ended a lot of people's careers from what I heard from other people. I never really spoke to you about the knee injury and how you came back from that. And, you know, when we think about these things, it was Division III basketball. No, I'm not knocking that at all because but it wasn't as though you were a scholarship player or anything. You were paying, right? They couldn't offer anything.
Exactly. You got financial aid and things like that.
Yeah.
But even during that time, I still thought I was going to play for the New York Knicks.
That's the attitude you have to have. Totally. I mean, I really think so. And it's funny because now I have my 14-year-old son who is 6'1" and 190 pounds. And he loves basketball, but there are days where it's like, I don't want to go to practice, or I'm sick, or so I make him call the coach, but he couldn't play last night. They wouldn't let him suit up. Wow. And I'm like, buddy, this is the stuff. So it's slowly, right, trying to change those things with him. My thing now as a parent, I try to be a matador and get you to come over here without screaming and yelling and stomping and doing all the things. I made a mistake with the experiments that were before him. But I think that's part of it. But motivation is such a thing. And I thought, boy, you could be a motivational speaker. I'm sure you have been at some point in your life, or write a motivational book on really how to just get through, because I say to my sons all the time, life never stops coming at you. Yeah. It's how you handle it. And the only thing you can control are your emotions, and most adults can't.
Well, first and foremost, I'm blushing, even though I've got this dark skin. I'm blushing. But what I would say to this is, you never forget the trauma that you had growing up.
Sure.
And I always remember, growing up in an apartment complex, not having any money, always being concerned. I was very fortunate that I was a pretty good athlete. I definitely blossomed young, which means everyone thought I was going to be great. And then I stopped growing and different things like that. So what's always fueled me is the fact that I always know that there's somebody else who wants whatever I have achieved. So I never sit back and go, whew, I've made it. Whew, I'm doing a really good job. It's like, okay, I got to keep grinding because whatever I did today is not going to be good enough for tomorrow. And it fatigues a lot of people. Like,
yes, it does.
I also know that as kind as you were about the success and things that I've had, I also know that I've burned people out because people have tried to keep up with me. And it's hard to keep up with me. I want to keep moving. I want to be the Energizer Bunny.
I love this.
I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is thank God that I'm alive. And then it's like, boom, feet on the ground, let's start going. Breakfast. No breakfast, let's go. Let's go get the workout in. Let's get some stuff done. Let's move. And let's start being productive every single day. And even when I was in Los Angeles for the last 10 years, the big thing I always talked about was the fact I'm just a kid from Rochester, man. So you guys can get get caught up in all this glitz and glamour.
Now, you realize that your friends make fun of you for the kid from Rochester, kid from the streets. I hear from your best friends, that whole family, and you know who I'm talking about. They will always go, oh, yeah. And they'll be like, yeah, he went to McQuaid. But I think you earned your way into McQuaid. Yeah. McQuaid is, having had a son that went there, I think it is one of the best schools I've ever seen. And I think I love that it's just guys because it allows guys to be guys. I've talked openly about substitute teaching. I think we teach young boys almost wrong. School is not designed for them. You have to sit for a long time and all this. And there was a way in McQuaid that they figured it out for guys. And I had a kid that was in and out of trouble, but man, he went there and then on to college, transformed his body, and ended up on a Division I team as a thrower in St. Louis, and then unfortunately had surgery, tore his labrum, and that kind of ended things for him. But
here's what I would say.
It was all driven by McQuaid.
I could do an entire hour on how great McQuaid is and how much McQuaid changed my life.
Sure.
And how much today the things that are my foundation are still from McQuaid. To me, it's the most amazing institute. I enjoyed it more than I did college. I enjoyed it more than some of the experiences that I've had in the business world and all the things I've learned. Just because no matter how hard.
You won. You had Van Gundy as your coach
in 1986.
Yeah. Didn't you win states?
No, in 1987 we won. We were the first ever Section 5 champions, and that was under Joe Marchese. Van Gundy was only there for a year, but he had an unbelievable impact on that 4-year window of students. And then we won in 87, and the following year, 88, with Greg Woodard and Drew Henderson and Jake Amjemi, they won the states. First time they won the states. But yeah, it was a pretty special time. But McQuaid, I mean, the great thing about McQuaid is it teaches you about being competitive, but, understanding that each and every day you've got to be the best you can be so you can be part of the team. And I'm not just talking about sports. I'm talking about the team. I mean, you know what it's like. You got all those honor rolls. You got all those, when you're in class, you can't be the dumbest guy in the class. You got to make sure you're doing the work and digging in and different things like that. And I learned from McQuaid, like the things that I don't want to do, you do first in the day. Because if you just keep putting stuff off, all you do is push it down. You got to do the hard things first. So whether it's you don't like reading, whether it's like you don't like math, whether it's you don't like science, you got to get that homework done right away. And I was very fortunate because I played a lot of sports, so I was always in study halls. And the great thing about McQuaid is those study halls had a lot of teachers that would help you and give you that one-on-one time if you were falling behind or, quite frankly, just weren't getting anything.
Yeah, I saw that with my son, that the amount of work, I don't know that it was just any harder, but it was more demanding, right? Because people go, oh, it's so hard. I'm like, I'm not sure that you can make trigonometry any harder than it already is.
Just they move it at a pace.
They move at a faster pace. He was in an AP English class, and I think in the first semester, they were reading 3 books, discussing one in class, and needed a paper on all 3. Yeah. And it was almost like that's just the expectation. And I wanted it for him to tighten up the margins because he was a really bright kid in Pittsburgh getting 95s and stuff, but it was all of a sudden, you get into around February, March, and it's like, don't worry about it, Jordan, hand it in at the end of the week. And I'm like, no, No. And McQuaid would be like, yeah, hand it in at the end of the week, 20 points off. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? And I liked that, and it was part of that motivation. I'm like, man, I would have loved something like this. And I just think it teaches you such things, as you're saying. And talk to anybody who sent kids there. The kids will tell you college was easy because you had the discipline. And I think that's the biggest thing is discipline.
You nailed it. My basketball team at St. John Fisher used to always think I was like a brainiac because I got great grades at Fisher. I always turned in my stuff on time. I had no problem writing. Being at Fisher, there's kids that came from, let's say, Albany or came from Syracuse. They didn't really know how to write.
Right.
McQuaid teaches you how to read, write, and become disciplined. Yeah. And the great thing about that is if you stay on a schedule, you never fall behind. So at Fisher, to your point, it was I love St. John Fisher, but let me tell you something, it was a lot easier than McQuaid.
Yeah, I believe that. I totally believe that. I didn't go to a McQuaid, and I found it easier and more enjoyable. Yeah. Like, I loved it. But that's interesting. But all that focus and discipline as you've gone through various parts of your career and things, what is it when you're trying then to motivate someone else? As you said, you burn people out trying to keep up with you. That's on them, I would say. But in a way, how do you motivate people when they're hitting roadblocks or they're having things in their lives? And being able to read people, I think, as a leader is really important.
Well, part of it is you learn as you go, and you learn from mistakes. And I probably have learned more from the mistakes than the successes I've had. And you also begin to think about moments that you had in your life and people who you interacted with and the way they worked with you. And I'll give you an example. As I've gotten older, to me, it's all about one-on-one relationships. I spent a lot of time, like when I went to Los Angeles, I sat down with every employee we had. There were over 370 employees, and wanted to know what made each one tick. And in those meetings, as you know, I always had my book.
Yep.
I'm just taking notes on each person. And afterwards, I wrote them a handwritten note. Hey, man, great meeting. Reference a couple things we talked about, but now I'm starting to build a bond. Early in my career, I made a huge mistake of managing and coaching everyone the same way.
Right.
And you have to understand that everybody looks at things a little bit differently. I talked earlier about, we're defined a lot by the traumas that we had in adolescence and when we were growing up.
Sure.
And sometimes we don't even know those are traumas. Sometimes we've even, suppressed them and things like that. But the one thing I always remember, and I was talking earlier today with Jim Johnson, who used to coach at Greece Athena. We were talking about Jeff Van Gundy. And Jeff Van Gundy coached me from the summer of '85 to the summer of 85 to the summer of '87.
40 years ago.
40 years ago. Thanks for reminding me of that. But he could rip you in practice, like literally rip you, and make you feel like you were about as big as an ant. But he would come in the locker room afterwards, and we had a locker room that was just for basketball at McQuaid. And, the guys would be done showering, we'd be getting ready, and he would sit next to you on the bench and just start talking to you about life or talking to you about current events and things like that. And he was building a bond with you and letting you know he cared, and that what happened on the court isn't necessarily the way he feels about you as a person. And I always remembered that. So there are times when I've got to be tough with an entire staff, but I find the time to go to people individually, especially the thought leaders on the team, and let them know that, I'm not happy with what's going on right now, but I still believe in you. We're still on the team.
Right.
We're going to make mistakes. We're going to solve those mistakes very quickly, and we're going to continue the momentum that we've had in the past when it comes to being successful.
Yeah, I think that you don't want to lose. You'll hear it in sports a lot. He lost the locker room, right? And the coach isn't there. And you don't want to lose anybody. And going to the thought leaders, the gossip people, it's a nice way to say it, thought leaders. But the people that would talk shit in a way or say, I've been here a long time. This is a new guy. I think that's really smart and empowering.
Sometimes you have to also, with those thought leaders, you have to explain why you did something or why you're doing something and let them in. And you'd be surprised that when you let people in through the back door sometimes, how much they think that they're in the boat with you. PJ Flack, the head football coach at the University of Minnesota, has a great saying, and he actually wrote a book about it called Row the Boat. and it's about being on the boat. If we're not rowing in unison, the boat's probably going to flip over.
Right.
And you got to think about that like really, really hard. The other thing I think that is really important as a leader is you have to define who your glue people are. And sometimes those glue people are not the leading scorer on the basketball team or the number one biller, or they're not the person that gets the accolades, but they're the ones in the trenches that that everyone recognizes contributes in ways that don't necessarily show up on a dashboard or a spreadsheet. You know, think about the Chicago Bulls. Dennis Rodman was a glue guy.
Yeah.
He was a distraction, but he was a glue guy. He did a little bit of everything.
Right.
When you define who those glue guys are, it can make a big difference. You think about the current Buffalo Bills team. It's a guy like Dawson Knox.
Yep.
You know, everyone talks about Kincaid's going to be the next great one. But Dawson Knox is somebody who helps control that locker room a little bit. Matt Milano controls that locker room a little bit. And there are going to be times that they're upset with Coach Sean, and you're going to need a leader to step up and figure out how all that interacts. And that's why as you build your team, you also have to build it with other leaders, leaders that you trust, whether it's individual players or employees, or it's individual managers that can explain sometimes the rationale behind why a coach did this or did that. It's easy to lose a locker room. Nick Sirianni, lost locker room with the Eagles. Right. You've got to figure out how to bring that back around, and I think it all comes down to being in unison with your thought leaders and also being in unison with your glue people, because it makes a big, big difference. If you look at a lot of really successful teams, and I think Pat Riley started this years and years ago with the Los Angeles Lakers, they have an executive committee, and it's made up of 7 or 8 players that meet with the head coach once a week. Mike Tomlin does it with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Really? And that's where you solicit feedback.
Wow.
So I always had what I called an AE council, because in our business and audio and streaming, we had, the biggest part of the facility was the sellers. Whether you had 40 or 100 sellers, you would grab 8 to 10 of them, and you'd have their peers say, who should be on the AE council? And you talk to them once a month and ask, what's going on? And I always ask simple questions. I learned a long time ago, ask open-ended questions, because you'll get people to respond freely.
Yeah.
So my questions used to always be, what's going well, what's not going well, and what's keeping you up at night? And you'd be amazed that I'd have 5 people in the room and myself, so 6 total, and we could get through 60 to 90 minutes with those 3 questions.
Really? I think that's great. You never thought of going into coaching? Well, I don't mean coaching in terms of life coaching, but I mean in terms of sports.
I absolutely did.
Yes.
And I'll be honest with you. I had breakfast early this morning with Jim Johnson, and one of the things he said is, why did you never go into coaching with all the connections you have with the big Van Gundy name? Jeff would do anything for you. I was scared of the nomadic lifestyle. I didn't want to go and 1 year be an assistant at Wisconsin, and the next year be an assistant in Florida, and then go to Division II and be a head coach and work my way up to Division I. It was intimidating to me. And again, as a kid who grew up with nothing, I wanted to start making some money.
I got you.
I wanted to make money. And do I regret that? I don't think I regret really that much, but do I think about what might have been? Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, would it be great to be on the bench with the New York Knicks when Jeff Van Gundy was the head coach? Absolutely. I mean, you know how much I love the Knicks, and that it's just different.
Yeah, you could have been there for. What was it, Alonzo Mourning that the fight is Van Gundy's on the ground.
That's the greatest.
He's being dragged around like a mop. He's got him by the ankle.
Because Alonzo Mourning and Larry Johnson didn't get along, and they faced off.
Yes.
They squared up with fists up, and Van Gundy was
Why was Van Gundy going to throw at me? He's like half their size.
Van Gundy was getting in between, and because he was so small and Alonzo Mourning was so strong, he literally just flicked him off like a fly. As he's going down, he grabs Alonzo Mourning's leg. It got worse. I don't know if you remember. I think it was 1999, Martin Luther King Day. Marcus Camby and Danny Ferry in the middle of the day squared off, and Van Gundy ran on the court. Marcus Camby square punched his coach, Van Gundy, in the temple, and Van Gundy went down. You got to Google it or
my God,
YouTube it. It's pretty funny. He never learned his lesson.
No. Well, you're trying to, keep the guys. You don't want them eating each other, so to speak,
Exactly.
and you don't want your players to get hurt. That's interesting. I love the idea of the council.
Yeah. It matters.
Did other people do that in the business? They did.
They started doing it. It became something.
But you started it.
I started. I never called it initially an AE council. I called it my executive insight team.
Yeah.
And you know me, I always had those little sayings.
Loved
Flutie and things like that, because I loved Doug Flutie when he was with the Bills. I always had like little names for things, but I just think it means a lot. I learned a lot from watching great coaches, and I was very fortunate. Again, we've used his name a couple of times, but with Jeff Van Gundy, when myself and another McCoy graduate, Greg Woodard, would go watch the Knicks practice, one of the things I always noticed is that after practice, Pat Riley would always be in this little stairway talking to Patrick Ewing. And one day we were at lunch afterwards, and I asked Coach, I go, how come Coach Riley always talks to Patrick in the stairwell? And he said, one of the things you learn as a leader is how to be able to effectively communicate with all of your players. And Patrick is a guy that has huge pride. And if you correct Patrick in front of the group, he goes into a shell. And he's not happy about it, and he feels like you've attacked him. So Coach Riley spends time with him after practice and tells him areas that he thinks that either he needs to work on or areas where he may not be giving the best effort. And that message is better delivered one-on-one. And it was one of those moments, because at the time I was working, I think I was running one sales org, and I was getting promoted to run an entire group of like 4 or 5 sales orgs. And all I kept thinking about the entire time was, I got to make sure everyone gets on my plan.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that way. It was like, how can we create a strategy, get everybody to understand the strategy, and then individually build tactics to be able to achieve the overall goal?
So what I'm hearing you say is meet the person where they are.
Not necessarily where they are, but at least halfway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
if someone's in a dark corner and they can't be saved, you can't go into that corner, because you'll end up going on a spiral with them.
Well, that's a good point. But sometimes you have people who are working and motivating, but they don't want to be shamed, so to speak, or disciplined, or whatever the term would be, in front of people. But you can kind of see that modify. Yeah, that's interesting, because
some of the biggest wins in my life, Bill, are when I have had someone who initially was one of my biggest critics who becomes my biggest fan by the time our time together is over. Because all of our time together is limited.
Right.
I mean, you and I have had relationships where we've been as thick as thieves, and then we go 5 years without really working together, and then we're back together again, and then it disappears. That happens in life. That's why those moments are so important, and you can never not register, like, did I make an impact? Did I do what I needed to do today?
Let me just tell you the impact you made. I walked into a basketball game last night, and I notice a kid on the other team who is really little. Like, I go, I can't believe this kid's in 9th grade. And he's got, his shirt practically comes down to his knees. A couple minutes later, his parents walk in, and it's an old friend of ours, Heath, who then says to me, hey, did you hear who's in town? He said that he works with an in-law of yours, and you were there, and you call, or they called, whatever it was.
My wife's cousin, Tommy.
Okay, but the thing that's so funny to me is it's the same thing. You've done exactly what you wanted to do. If there are raving fans, there are raving fans. People get excited when you come to town. I'm not one of them, but no, but they do.
After all those nice things I said about this facility.
Yes, I know. But it's an interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's got to make you, because I'm sure when you're the new guy coming in somewhere, you're going to have enemies. And how do you get people to come over? And you're demanding. And I don't mean it as like, but you have standards, right? So let's meet those standards. And getting people to come aboard, sometimes you lose some people along the way, right? And yet others who stick around, I think, start to see the benefit of that.
I've kept any negative exit interview I've ever had with an employee that has been about my leadership. I've kept that file, just because I always want to make sure that I learn from it. You know, sometimes getting harsh criticisms can be the best thing for you, because it can level set things. But yeah, at the end of the day, Bill, I've always wanted to bring people together to do things as a team that they couldn't do as individuals.
Right.
And my whole goal was, how do we motivate a team, have the right strategy, and push them so that we can achieve things they never thought they could do? We were able to do that. I mean, it was amazing what we did years and years ago at WCMF.
Yep.
Then we took the same blueprint, customized it a little bit. Then we did the same thing at 98PXY. I remember coming back from an event with you at WCMF when we were driving and we were making a left-hand turn into the Winton Road facility, and Coolio was on the air. And it was when that Coolio song with Michelle, whatever, it was that movie that she was in.
Yeah, it was Gangster's Paradise.
My man,
yeah,
you know it.
Yeah.
And I turned to you and I said, if somebody gave me PXY to run, I would just destroy it.
Yeah, you did say that.
And 6 months later, Bob Morgan gave that to me. And 1996, 1997, it was record billing. Like, they couldn't believe the numbers we were putting up with. That's what got me on people like Don Balukas and Steve Dodge's radar screen.
Right.
And then we took that and moved into the director of sales.
Where does the confidence come from? Because you have to, I'll take it to more of a metaphysical idea, which I know is probably a little weird for you, but, well, I don't mean it, but it is. But a belief is a thought that you think over and over, whatever that is, right? And I'm one who wonders now, do you have to grind as hard, or do you have to really just believe and know the way? So my question for you is, you did say that. Give me PXY and I will do this. And it's a top 40 station in Rochester, New York. And at the time, I mean, I guess if you were to show it, was underserved or underserving, under-delivering, let's say that way, in revenue. And where does that confidence come from? Because lots of people start out with, I'll call that bluster, but they can't deliver. And bluster's not the right word, but they can't deliver. And so to have that belief in yourself, where does that come from?
I'm not sure if it was confidence or if it was or belief in myself. I think it was always, I looked at situations for the potential. I never looked at job opportunities for the money. I looked at, first and foremost, can I win? Can I make a difference? And can I build this team or recruit people who can put me in a position so I can be successful? That was always my filter at a young age, and it's kind of expanded since then.
Sure.
I never felt like it was just confidence. I think that my secret sauce has always been that, and you'll laugh, but it's just a phrase that everybody uses, is no one is going to outwork me at my job. So, and I mean that because there are going to be people in the office that actually work harder than me, people who are on the air or people in promotions or whatever it may be. But when it came to anyone that was in the Rochester market that was leading the market, let's say they were the market president like I was, they weren't going to outwork me. And no one in the company was going to outwork me on that. And at the end of the day, I still believe that hard work and disciplined hard work that is focused is always going to win. There are people that are in jobs for 12, 15 hours a day and they're failing because they're not disciplined. They're not doing the things that need to get done.
Well,
I was always focused on doing the things I needed to do.
That's interesting because I believe more now, and having gone through this experience and keeping this podcast going for 2 years. I mean, I always say, and the guys make fun of me, the barrier to entry for anything is gone. So you don't necessarily need the middleman as much anymore. Or like a delivery system. It's there. You can find it. You can do the structure. But the idea of, like, you did outwork, that can become mentally exhausting for some people. And I often think that, but I say now, we have to do hard things. And the reason we have to do hard things, in my opinion, is the satisfaction. When I was on radio, I didn't know how I did. I could leave a studio and feel like I did a great fucking show. Man, I lit the world on fire that day. Yeah. And I wouldn't know the results for 3 months, 4 months. And that's why I liked working with my hands and hanging a door, because I could look at that and go, I did that today. And there was some tangible thing. But I really think by doing hard things, you start to get that satisfaction. And part of the reason that I think the grind, as people will say, is important is that you start to see the progress. And when you start winning, you feel better and you can push further and you can do that. And I've had my youngest son probably, I think it has been a traumatic experience for him with parents, split. His mom was in Alabama. He's in and out of different schools and I can see it, but that's where my thing with him is, let's do hard things. Let's do hard things. And that's why, I try to get up, and I haven't been as consistent about it over the probably since I started the podcast, but I am now, is I'll get up and I jump in a freezing cold shower and I have the Tabata timer and I do it for like a minute and a half. Whoa. And I try to make sure I'm getting, just because it wakes you up, but I like the hard things and I feel good. I get out of there and sometimes I'm laughing. It's like, oh my God, I did it a minute and a half. Can I go a minute 35? Those are the things that then the rest of the day, you can push yourself through other obstacles that are going to come at you. They just are. And if also, I always talk about the zone. You can get in that zone, and it's kind of, to me, it's a higher frequency in your mind. It just is.
I had a phrase that I started using probably my last 5 or 6 years in Los Angeles to my team, and it was always embrace the suck.
Yeah,
no matter what, you're going to have things that really suck that you don't want to do. You've got to embrace the suck. And in many cases, you've got to do what sucks, going back to my McQuaid training right away.
Right.
So, it's like, believe it or not, I don't really like working out. But I know based upon my family's history with longevity, based upon, heart disease in my family, I got to get up first thing in the morning. I got to get that workout in, man. Right. I got to go. And many days I don't want to do it. It's embrace the suck. And when it's over, to your point about working hard, you feel great.
You feel great.
I accomplished something.
Yes.
It's done, etc.
Right.
I watched, I'm sure you watched it because I know you do a lot of research for all the shows that you've been on, but I watched an admiral give a commencement speech. And one of the things he said was the number one thing you do is make your bed. Like I'm staying at my sister-in-law's right now. The first thing I do every morning is make my bed. Yeah. That bed is made, and it's as tight as it looks like in a hotel.
Okay, I don't do it that well, but my kid will always say to me, you make your bed every day. I go, yes, every day, make your bed. Because at the end of the day, you're coming home to a made bed, and it feels better.
Feels a little better.
And it's all about feeling good. Yeah. That's the main thing is like I feel like our whole job on the planet, there's no meaning to life other than the meaning you apply to it. That's it.
If you and I had talked off the air about the fact that I've kind of gotten really into Ryan Holiday and the Stoic way and Marcus Aurelius and things that he wrote about, but he wrote a lot about how tough the world is and how tough life is. And this is going back to the Roman times.
Sure.
Nothing has changed today. Mm-mm. What has changed is we've gotten softer as a society. Mm-hmm. We've lowered our standard. One of the reasons I like Mike Tomlin with the Pittsburgh Steelers is the standard is the standard. Let's not ever lower our standards to make other people feel good. And it's one of the criticisms that I would say when you look at school districts and you look at how school districts grade out. Well, the benchmark for all the school districts was what is the graduation rate and what is the suspension rate? Mm-hmm. And then we'll say whether the school's doing good or not. Well, it's really easy to trick that.
Oh, sure it is.
Increase the graduation rate by lowering
the suspension rate. Right.
It's simple.
Keep those kids in school.
And we wonder why school systems are starting to fall. We're to your point, 20 minutes ago about McQuaid. McQuaid never lowers the standard.
No.
If anything, they're increasing the standard of what needs to be done. When I was at McQuaid, there was no AP classes.
Oh, okay.
We all took the same classes.
Okay.
Well, they're challenging themselves, and it's going to continue to get better and better with a guy like Steve Saluza was the president there. They're going to keep pushing that place and try to make sure that they continually are educating and developing men for others, but at the same time, developing people who can be real contributors to society, whether that's here in Rochester, whether that's in Los Angeles, whether it's in Atlanta, wherever it may be.
Let's transition a little bit to ego, and I follow me on this one, though, because as a leader, you've got to have ego, and ego is something that can often be talked about even metaphysically. Like you'll hear people say, put the ego aside, put the ego aside. As a leader who's going to be successful, and you mentioned a book off air called Good to Great, and it was a great read. I loved it when I read it, and I don't even know why, because I was it's just doing radio talking. But I found it really beneficial, and one of the things that I saw companies, and it was all about companies that were good, they were doing fine, they were holding their own, and how they transitioned into being great companies. And one of the ones at the time, and I don't know if it's still the case or not, was Walgreens. But what the CEO talked about was hiring people that were smarter than him. Now, that's putting your ego aside, and that's very hard for a lot of people because they don't want to be challenged in a way as the leader. It's their thing. They have worked so hard to get where they are, right? There's a lot of personal investment. Sometimes it's their whole identity. And now you're going to come in and do this. And I forget who was the head of Walgreens at the time, but they would hire people who could be CEOs anywhere. And somehow we're able to retain those people, make them feel valued, and they grew into an amazing company. Yeah. How do you? That's hard to do. It's hard to retain those people because they too have a life, as you said, and all that stuff. And then it's hard for, I think, anybody who's achieved to sort of step back and put the ego aside a little bit and listen to people who you may say that guy's really smart, but wait a beat before you come blasting me in here. And
well, there's like a couple things. First, I would say you always have to challenge yourself that it's not because of you, it's because of the team. And when you begin to think it's all because of you, that's when your ego gets out of control.
Sure.
I mentioned Ryan Holiday, the author, a while ago. He has another book called "Ego is the Enemy," and it's one of the. It's a book that really will change it. It's based upon the writings during the Roman Empire, but it also, if you talk to a coach like Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, and I'm not trying to pigeonhole myself as just a jock or a football guy, but Lane Kiffin talks about the fact that when he was a successful offensive coordinator for Pete Carroll at USC, and they won national championships, and then all of a sudden he became the whiz kid, head coach of the Oakland Raiders, left in the middle of the night, went to Tennessee, then left Tennessee in the middle of the night, went to USC. His ego was massive. And then he got fired on the tarmac after getting blown out and didn't know where he was going to go. And he was humbled, and he read Ego is the Enemy. And the one thing it talked about is that you're only as strong as the team you build, and your legacy is going to be based upon your ability to be successful with that team, not about you. And one of the things I've always tried to do in my career is understand that when things are going great, I probably had a really small part of it. And when things are going bad, I probably had a huge part of it because I took my eye off the ball.
Okay.
And I think that's humility, and that's what Ego is the Enemy really, really talks about. I'll use Jeff Van Gundy again as an example. When Jeff Van Gundy finally got the head coaching job after Don Nelson was blown out with the Knicks, I was in his office with the Knicks, and it was a desk, and on the desk he had all of his files everywhere, but around the room were just boxes. And I go, hey, coach, are you going to unpack these boxes? Like, you've had this job for a little while, this and that. Why don't you get your assistant to do it? And he goes, this really isn't my office. I'm renting this. There were coaches in here before me, and there'll be a lot of coaches in here after me. What I need to do is to focus on what's going to happen on that court tonight. And that laser focus was something that I always thought about. Like, no matter how high I got at whatever media company I was working for or running at the time, it was all about the fact that this is a temporary job because things are always fluid. Yeah. Those people who think that they actually made it and sit down are like, whew, I'm ready now. Put my feet up. You're going to lose.
That's when you lose. And I mean, believe me, I've learned that more than once, and I think that there were times where I would be so motivated. Every once in a while, I don't know why, but I rewatched The Last Dance. And it's the whole story of the Bulls and Michael Jordan. And there's a lot of focus on Jordan, other players as well, but mostly on him. And that whole idea of making something up in your head to have a chip on your shoulder and go out there. And I often go, that sounds so like mentally crazy. Whenever I had a chip on my shoulder and I had a whole cannon of fuck you, I did much better. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I don't know what that is because I go, boy, that sounds, again, like exhausting. I don't want to have people, you're just so rigid and you hate everybody. Yeah, doesn't seem like a good life.
The older I've gotten, the softer I've gotten.
Okay, me too on this stuff.
Because I used to always use every snub as motivation to work harder.
I did too.
But I think you learn over time. Some of that stuff is really good. I mean, The Last Dance, phenomenal.
Yeah.
When Michael gets emotional talking about the fact that I did everything I did to win championships.
Yes.
And if he knows people enjoyed that. If they want to look back at it now and say it was a horrible experience, this and that, in the moment, everybody enjoyed being a world champion.
Sure they did.
And what I always used to say to people is, no matter how hard it is, do me a favor and tell me you didn't get better and tell me your bank account didn't get higher.
Yeah, sure.
And I would drop the mic.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I was always very focused on were are people making more money working for me because they're taking part in the success?
Right.
And the second thing is, am I constantly making people better? Am I making them more well-rounded as employees or as individuals?
Okay, so that's good. How do you keep yourself from getting stale and keep evolving? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Trying to change the thinking, the culture of something. You can go so far, and then you've got to keep going. So how do you do that with yourself? Is it the books that you're reading? Is there obviously, you've mentioned a couple books, there's an investment in yourself to be that leader.
Yeah, I think it's many-fold. I think the first is you got to be a passionate reader and read how people did things both in the past, but how they're currently looking at things and evolving. I think number two is you got to have a great cabinet of people you respect, and you got to constantly be talking to them. And those are people that are inside, but mostly outside the industry, because they give you a different perspective.
Yeah.
I got a friend now who runs a big optical company, a glass company, and it's international. And hearing him talk about the challenges he faces today versus what it was like when he was managing radio stations on the East Coast, it's night and day. And it really gives me a different perspective. And it challenges you to approach your business a little differently. And the last thing, and as you know, I'm a sport nut, I think that one of the greatest things you can do to always constantly reignite yourself is to watch sports. It's the greatest reality show going.
It is.
And the lead up to it, when you hear how people actually approach things, is pretty amazing. I'm excited. I learned today that Peacock has been doing a behind the scenes on Notre Dame football. And they extended it by 6 episodes because they obviously are the national championship. I can't wait to see how Marcus Freeman motivates his team, because if you're constantly being a student in life and picking up little tidbits from other people, you then can wove it into your own approach.
Yeah.
And you constantly have got to be changing it. None of us are a finished product. We're all still being molded into the sculpture that
I always think like you're not the same person you were 5 years ago.
Not at all.
You're not. And that was always sort of my problem with the idea of a cancel culture, in that if the pendulum is moved and this is no longer acceptable, let the person learn the lesson and move forward. But instead it was this whole, we're going to shut you out and cut you out. And I go, boy, that doesn't move things forward. That to me is a terrible way to do things. But
remember, human nature, and mostly human nature in America, loves a comeback. So there's no question you can be canceled, but you can come back just as strong, if not stronger.
If that isn't like one of the truest things that has ever been said, it's absolutely, we love a comeback.
Love it.
We do. And you love a comeback story. And I think that the vice president in a week or so, his whole Netflix story, it's a comeback, right? It's a comeback. You watch that guy be a comeback, and
but not only him. I mean,
keeping politics out of it. But
you got to look at what the president has done. I mean, he was disgraced, and to be able to energize and win the popular vote is pretty staggering. As somebody who is knee deep in this political cycle, I ran political for a media company for the last 14 months. It's a pretty remarkable story. Like, dislike, whatever it is, it's like, wow.
Yeah, right. I have to agree with that. Yeah. I do. And I don't know that things will be as bad as some people fear or worry or whatever the thing is. I think that it's an outsider. We often say the country needs to be run like a business, and then we don't put a business guy in there. Now you do, and you get scared because he's not meeting the standard of the office by which I don't know that there really is, but we would say in the ether, there's this idea that you have to be presidential, you have to be this, and you have to be that. And some of the things certainly weren't that. I mean, the fact that you turned it into a I think, like, I remember watching the first debates the first time, and he's calling names. I'm like, holy shit, you can do that? I didn't know you could do that. And it was a different way, but it might be the way in, like, business, right? You might call somebody that, and that's your motivating thing. I don't know. Whatever it is, as long as I'm upright and breathing, I think I'm fine.
At the end of the day, we still need to be able to communicate across the aisle.
Yes,
and we need to be
100%.
able to have disagreements and learn from the disagreements. It's when everyone becomes my enemy and I'm going to kill my enemy.
That's the problem.
That's when there's a problem. But yeah. I mean, I think that some of the best relationships I've had in my life are born out of disagreements or arguments with people. I mean, you remember back in the day, some of the brawls I used to have with Brother Weeze, and the love that the two of us have for each other even today.
Yeah.
You grow tighter through conflict. You grow tighter through disagreement, because now you start to understand how the other person's wired and how they think.
Exactly. And I think that a lot of times, though, there are people who will acquiesce or back off or whatever. And I'll always say, stand your ground and have your points and bring them forth. You don't have to come with a lot of fire, but you need to be steady and you need to be strong. And that does give you, then, I know what this person is, right? And you don't want to be wishy-washy. Beige is the worst color in the world to me. And it's the color of the walls here. But it's the worst color in the world, because I can't identify it as anything. Yeah. I want to know. I know what red is. I know what black is. I know what the yellow is. I got that. Beige, I'm not sure. And I think as a person, you don't want that either.
I had a manager one time that used to push the managers when we would do breakout sessions really, really, really hard. And I used to say, why are you being so difficult? We're crushing it. And he said, I want to understand where this person breaks, because then I'll understand how far I can actually lead them in the organization, how high they can go in the organization. And it was a unique approach. I'm not sure it's an approach that would work today. But he would push them hard. I also had, a female boss at another media company, and she, constantly would challenge many times on basic things. She just wanted to make sure that you thought it through, and she wanted to make sure that you were going to stand by your conviction. She was looking for those people who didn't want conflict, that said, you know what, you're right. This doesn't matter. I don't want to give Bill this raise. He doesn't really deserve it. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. And and those are not the people that you really want standing by you, right? Exactly. Those are not the ones. Kevin, this has been great. I think that, I don't know what plans are for Kevin LeGrett, but I see Kevin LeGrett Consulting could certainly thrive. Or is there a book? Is there a book coming?
I think I'm going to be...
You know a lot of authors and things. I mean, I know you know people.
I think I'm going to be the executive producer of Billified.
Oh, are you?
I'm going to put together some sales org here to
that would be amazing.
All set up for you.
That would be amazing.
And maybe get you some help, so you're not doing the video, the audio, and lining up the guests.
It is it has been a one-man band. And
it's a labor of love, though. You can see that you love it.
I do love it. It's what I've always enjoyed. And the podcast has been better than I didn't know what to expect, right? So you don't really know. And it's been successful in the podcast world when you look at what podcasts get on numbers on nationally, and go outside the Rogans and the other people, Caller Daddy and things like that, or whatever it is.
Caller Daddy.
Is it? Yeah.
Alex Cameron.
Yeah. Those podcasts do huge numbers, but they're far and few between. And you look. And once you get a niche, and then it's just growing it. And I would love to, at some point, have an entire production company. I would love to have my own building that I own. I'd love to have edit suites for video. I'd love to be doing some docuseries and continue on. That is kind of my goal with that.
Just remember, Dave Portnoy started off doing blogs.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you put your mind to.
Well, I
believe
that.
You build it out.
Yeah.
And seriously, it's about passion. It's about having people who believe in you, and it's about building out something that's sustainable.
Right.
While at the same time being able to energize your audience.
Right.
And that audience will follow you anywhere. I mean, I was reading an article this morning about Pat McAfee and how high those numbers grew for College Game Day this year.
Yeah.
And they're attributing all of them to Pat McAfee, because all of those numbers are 18, 24, 21-34. And they're not coming for Nick Saban, even though Nick Saban's been unbelievably
yes,
great.
He has. Yeah, I agree.
It's the Pat McAfee
but it's also great that Saban, I don't know if Saban was aware of his face and low reaction to things. Like just doesn't really react, right? Everybody else jumped around. And that was highlighted by McAfee, which just, you know what I'm saying? But Saban embraced that, and it kind of had made him more an endearing character.
No question.
I think the commercial for Airbnb with him where he's mowing the lawn and, no showers more than 5 minutes is kind of the guy we expect him to be.
It's so great.
And to put that guy, I mean, all comedy is taking that guy and putting him in a situation that's uncomfortable, right? Yeah. I mean, a hot chick, there's a yoga studio down here. Some of the guys on the podcast, we have to pause because they all have to watch the yoga girls leave, right?
When you had Jimmy in here a couple of weeks, he paused. He wanted to watch them.
Yeah. So what I'll always say to these guys, if you pointed at one of them and said, oh, and this is terrible, what a slut. Nobody thinks anything. But if all of a sudden somebody who's coming to the chiropractor that's also down there and they're old and they got a cane and they're hunched over and you go, man, what a slut that woman is. That's funny because it's the dichotomy. And I think that's really what McAfee has brought. I mean, that's without even knowing. It's just his personality. Yeah.
I'm very proud of the fact that in, I think it was 2010 or 2011, I was overseeing the Indianapolis market. And a gentleman named Rick Green and I were approached by a morning show, Bob and Tom.
Yeah.
And Tom Griswold, who really was leading that show when it came to adding things, came to us and he said, hey, I really want to put this guy on the air with us. We need about $12,000 during the football season. And we're like, well, who's the person? He said, the punter for the Indianapolis Colts.
Okay, the punter.
I go, are you kidding me? Like the punter? You got to be kidding me. Like I ran the Buffalo Bills radio network. Yeah. I had Doug Flutie on Brother Weeds. Right. I had Drew Bledsoe. I'm like, the punter? What are you talking? This guy's a character, man. He had just gotten arrested for jumping in the river, and he was intoxicated. And so Rick and I went back and forth, and Tom kept being really passionate. He came again the next day. So I said, let's give it a try. And that's how Pat McAfee started.
You're kidding me.
I would never, ever give the credit for it, but
no.
It started with the Bob and Tom show. And as the executive, the division president of Indianapolis at the time, I signed off on the deal, and we did Pat McAfee.
Wow.
Yep.
Look at that.
I'm sure that if I saw Pat and I talked to him, he would remember that because I did meet him several times when he would come in and be on Bob and Tom. But what he's been able to do it's been truly amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. And the best part about it, he was really, really smart that he did it as his own business.
Yes.
It was almost like years ago we used to talk with that program director, I forget what his name was, but he used to always talk about Charles Lacodera and the Big Mattress Show. And Charles owned that entire show. I didn't know what that guy's name was.
Yes, you do. Harry. Wasn't it Jacobs?
Oh, yeah. I forgot his name. Dark time.
Oh, God. I
was so positive this whole thing didn't crush anybody. You might have to cut that out.
There was a time where I talked about him and I made fun of him when I was doing mornings on CMF, and they got a call. I think we tried to call him and he didn't want to come on or whatever it was. He threatened something, like some lawsuit or something, and I was like, "That's not what this was."
I only said dark period. I didn't say anything bad.
Well, I did. I just said something bad. Well, thank you for giving me some time. I know that
no problem. It's great seeing you, man.
It's great seeing you as well. And I got to tell you, I've been making a lot of changes for myself, right? Awesome. And in here, and for me, probably started at the end of October, and it's been kind of a grind. I don't know what it's been, but it's been interesting. It's been fun. I've seen progress, and then talking to guys like you, it just makes it so much better.
Life only throws obstacles at you that they're assured that you can handle if you're willing to accept the challenge.
Yeah, I would believe that. Absolutely believe that. For Kevin LeGrett.
Let's go.
Oh, I can't believe I got him on the podcast. Who once called me and said, you've had Charlie, you've had Greg, you've had... When's my turn?
Jim Berkeley.
Yes.
I mean, what's going on? What am I getting on?
When am I getting on?
Greg Connors doesn't know as much about the Bills as I do. Come on.
Well, I don't know. Greg, I always say is going to be the future owner, but I'm not sure.
That would be awesome.
Yes, he is so... Watching a game with Greg is an interesting That's a task. That's a task.
I'll come on anytime. We'll do it from LA.
All right, that'd be great.
Cool.
For Kevin LeGrett, I'm Bill Moran. I'll see you tomorrow.
Well, since I left California, baby, things have gotten worse. Seems the land of opportunity for me is just a curse. Tell that judge in Bakersfield, my title has to wait.